Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. I'm Brian Easton, author of the Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series. Today we're having some moonshine, Catdaddy Moonshine. Now, the difference between moonshine and whiskey is basically semantics. Moonshine technically refers to illegal whiskey that taxes have not been paid on. My great grandfather was a moonshine maker, a bootlegger back during Prohibition, and had some stories to tell. So, but moonshine is basically used just to kind of denote a certain mystique or evoke a sense of nostalgia. It's basically the same thing. It's white whiskey that's not been aged at all, like the George Dickel white whiskey that we talked about last time, and usually made from corn. But you could make moonshine out of anything. People used to use rye back in the 1700s, and then in the southern U.S. they used corn. They can even make it out of sugar, but there's no real difference. So I'm going to let Cat Daddy stand on its own tonight. Now this, it doesn't taste at all like the whiskey that I usually drink. It's got a strong spice of what I think is a nutmeg kind of a taste. So it's got a fairly sweet uh, flavor to it, but it has a nose kind of for corn. I don't know. It's good. I like it as long as I don't drink too much of it because I'm not that fond of the sweet liquors. Anyway, I think we got a good show for you tonight. We're going to talk about silver and the kind of bullets that it makes. Go into that like we talked about, and we're going to look into more of the code of the monster hunter and take another step into the 10 fears. So stay with me, won't you? So talking about silver bullets and what makes them inferior to lead bullets and why do they work differently in my books. I'll tell you why. First of all, we got to talk about the differences between silver and lead. Now they differ in different respects. Lead has about 10% higher density than silver, so a silver bullet is going to have a little less mass than a lead bullet of identical dimensions. Pure silver is less malleable than lead, not as soft, falls between lead and copper in terms of hardness. But a silver bullet will accept the rifling of a gun, but it's because it's harder that than what the rifling is designed for that will burn up the rifling. It'll chew up those grooves over time. And of course, nobody has to really worry about this in real life, but for Sylvester, it's a valid point. And so we see in the books where he has to change out barrels of his 45s from time to time. And in the lineage, he gets a rifle with rifling actually designed for silver bullets by the gunsmith in the gun town in Pakistan. So aside from that, the terminal impact of a silver bullet is somewhat speculative, and that is the terminal impact being what it does to the target when it hits it. Like I said, it's somewhat speculative. There's not just a whole lot of research been done on this. Different people have, and we'll talk about that. But by and large, it's speculative, and it will depend on a variety of factors, including the size of your bullet, the shape of the bullet, distance to target, and what is the target made out of? Are you shooting at a werewolf? Are you shooting at a concrete block? What's the target? So at short ranges, the silver bullets more likely to give better penetration than a lead bullet. That is, it's going to penetrate deeper into the tissue. And keep in mind, you kill a living organism with a bullet by destroying tissue. It's not piercing an organ necessarily or punching through that you're looking for. You want to dump that energy from the bullet inside the mass of your target so it, in essence, explodes on the inside. Bullets deform. They start off at a certain size. When they hit a bone or other things, they expand, and this is what causes the massive damage. And the same holds true with werewolves, of course. So even though silver won't deform as much as lead, that is, it doesn't want to expand when it hits the target because it's harder. It's a harder metal, so it breaks apart as an end result when it hits something hard like bone. Your silver bullet punches in, and then instead of expanding like you want it to, uh, it splinters, fragments, and which is not an altogether bad thing if you're looking to inflict some serious pain on somebody. It makes it a lot harder to dig out, for sure. But that's one of the other differences between silver and lead. It's its tendency to overpenetrate. So you lose that energy that should be dumped into the target. Now, Mythbusters, if you've watched that program, in 2007, they did an episode where they demonstrated this very thing. They demonstrated the greater penetration depth of silver bullets versus lead. Not conclusive, in my opinion, however, because in the show they utilized a 250 grain lead slug and a 45 caliber long Colt round. If you don't understand guns or ammunition, that's okay. I'm not an expert on it either, even though I play one on TV. Anyway, they used by comparison, they used a lighter 190 grain silver slug. I'm sorry, they used a 250 grain lead slug versus a 190 grain silver slug fired at a closer range. So this is obviously not an accurate comparison in my mind. In another episode of Mythbusters that was 2012, I believe, showed that silver bullets are less accurate than lead when they're fired from the M1 Garand, which is a rifle, if you don't know. And so they've tested this kind of thing, and generally speaking, they're showing that the silver bullet is not a silver bullet after all. It's actually inferior to lead, which is what we've been saying. I'm going to go on with my case against silver bullets here for a while before we get to the redeeming value of it. So there's a man named Michael Briggs who works with the author of the Mercy Thompson series, who did an entire silver bullet research program where he cast them, he loaded them and fired them and tested the results, and had some scientific equipment there with him to measure his ratings. And what he did with the experiments was, after making a custom mold to ensure the sizes of the silver bullets were comparable to the lead bullets, he fired them, and he found that the silver bullets were slightly slower than the lead bullets and less accurate, more erratic at longer ranges. So close range, it's pretty good. It's pretty comparable. Farther away you get, he finds in his research that the silver bullets tend to stray from the mark, which is nothing that we don't know. Silver, as opposed to lead, melts at 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a lot of degrees, which makes it much harder to work with. I, in my youth, tried to cast a few silver bullets using a propane torch and a 45 bullet mold, and I can tell you the results were less than spectacular. I got a big lump of silver for my efforts, and that was it. I'd had enough. My calling to be a silversmith was over and done with that day. But it melts at a very high temperature, and it's hard to work with if you don't have all the proper equipment and if you're not properly trained. So, in terms of weaponry, it's just as difficult to use. There are three aspects as to why Winter Fox and Sylvester James seem to be mostly unaffected by everything that we've talked about up until now. All the poor qualities of silver and its comparison to a regular lead bullet, why my silver bullets work. The first reason why my silver bullets work is practice, experience. My characters fire silver bullets. That's one of the things that they do. If they don't know how to do that, then they'd already be dead. It's not just experience, but generational experience. Michael Winterfox learned it from a man who had learned it from generations back. He taught it to Sylvester. And so this is not just a one-off experiment like we were talking before. These are generations of trial and error and a waste of a lot of money, I might add. But we're talking about a work of fiction, so we have the money to spend when it comes to make-believe. So experience. The eye knows where the bullet goes, and the hand holding the weapon compensates. If you fire a particular type of bullet, I don't care what it is, if a particular kind, a particular brand, and that brand is made, to specifications, time and time again, it's consistent. You're going to know where that bullet goes. You're going to know your gun. You're going to know where to hold your hand, where to look, and where to fire to put your shots where you want them. So that's the first thing, and maybe the most important thing. The second is the silver itself, the way Winter Fox was taught and how he taught Sylvester how to make the bullets. That is cold working the metal as the first stage in the process, where soft silver, and pure silver is very soft, can be annealed without turning it into an alloy like sterling. So it keeps its purity, and it also keeps its relative softness. The resultant silver bullet is not only 99% pure fine silver, but its ballistics are sound by following this process. Now, this process is not just creative license on my part. I didn't just dream this up like I have. I mean, I admit I dream up things. Of course, I'm an author. But this I did not completely dream up. This comes from a metallurgical paper that I found dating back to the 1800s, 17th century, in which the author claims to have found this very secret to working silver, annealing it without losing any of its properties. The third and last element to why my silver bullets work is in the loading of the cartridge itself. That is, the grains of powder that are being used. The grains perfectly complement the bullet, meant to perfectly complement the gun, the weapon that you're firing out of. Specific tolerances I'm talking about of the charge, whether it's for a 45 ACP, 9mm Parabellum, 9mm Luger, long Colt, whatever you have, the specific tolerances for these weapons, for these bullets, these cartridges. You put all that together, and as long as you're consistent with it. Too hot of a load or too light, and the effects of the accuracy of the round are going to suffer. So continuing our discussion on the 10 fears, we're almost out of them. We've got a few more to go. I was saving these last, I think we have 3 more to go. I'm saving these last 3 for last because I think they're some of the most interesting. So tonight, and just as a brief recap, the 10 Fears is an article I wrote for Horrorwood.com several years ago, where I linked the 10 classic movie monsters, to my way of thinking, the Big 10 movie monsters, to some basic fears of mankind. And tonight we're going to talk about the creature from the Black Lagoon. The creature is the most popular universal monster. He sells more merchandise than all of the others do. There's something about the creature that people like, and I think I know why. The creature of the Black Lagoon was the Jaws of his time. He was the first reason that it wasn't safe to go under the water before the shark ever showed up. So there's that. And then it doesn't take a psychoanalyst to understand why the gill man, that is the creature, frightens us. Fear of being dragged into the deep, where we are utterly vulnerable, completely helpless. I mean, man hardly has the same autonomy in water that he does on land. And unless there's a submarine in the equation, we're not doing much of anything but surviving, even if that. And so if you consider that our aquatic mobility is roughly half of what it is on land, and we become fair game for seafaring predators, and are. Likewise, most of our inventions that serve as equalizers for man virtually worthless underwater unless it's a specially made thing. You know, it's made to work underwater specifically. It's not going to function. Not going to function correctly anyway. So uh, when you take that into consideration, you factor in the special training and the specific equipment required to even breathe for short periods underwater. And it doesn't take long before you reach the conclusion that we meet every criteria for prey. Added to this, the creature from the Black Lagoon has the singular distinction of being the only Universal classic movie monster who holds the distinction of being completely unassociated with the human race in any way. He was never a human, never is going to become human. He is the embodiment of a predatory mystique, usually reserved for large carnivores and hostile aliens. So, in such a light, he becomes the ideal hunter, and we the perfect game. What's there not to be afraid of? Last week, we started talking about the Code of the Monster Hunter, which is a set of guidelines that I put down for the Legends of the Monster Hunter series that MB Press put out a few years ago. And the second rule, we did the first one last week, which was to save, or rather to kill the monster before you save the damsel, because killing the monster is your job. I'm talking to monster hunters. These guidelines are set out specifically to monster hunters. So the second rule, or the second guideline of the Code of the Monster Hunter, is don't lie to yourself about what you see and what you do. Hunting monsters is a bloody trade. Make no excuses for it. And I think that's pretty well self-explanatory. If you're going to be a monster hunter, if you're going to fight with monsters, if you're going to risk the abyss and risk becoming a monster yourself, you need to be honest with yourself about it. Come to terms with it and not try to put some kind of a face on it that it doesn't deserve. It's nothing glamorous. It's nothing exciting, nothing heroic. And we talked about that last time, how your job as a monster hunter is anti-hero at best. Heroes save damsels first. Monster hunters kill the monsters first. So monster hunting is a bloody trade. Accept it, get used to it, and fight the good fight like you mean it. These are some Legos that my son put together. They're from a collection from a few years ago called the Monster Fighters series. And of course, when he was born, we had to get all of them for him. This one is a werewolf one, of course. He's put this together, and it comes with a little werewolf here. Got some pictures to show you. And there's the monster hunter. So comes with a tree, and the monster hunter's got that gun and everything. Pretty cool. And so Samuel put that together. Wanted me to show it on tonight's episode. He's pretty proud of it. So there you go, Samuel. You're famous now. Hey, thanks for joining me on Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. We'll see you next time.